Okay, I'd like to welcome you to this guest lecture today by Kirk Bloodsworth, a man who has a lot to tell us about the death penalty, the failures of the death penalty, and the exoneration process. We're very lucky to have him here, and it is here in part because of the work of Aubrey Rose, my assistant to this class, who worked very hard to set this meeting up. So I'm going to turn this over to Aubrey to introduce our speaker and to put this in context. Aubrey, thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Aubrey Rose. I'm the TA for Honors 302 Colloquium Extreme Punishments. And a lot of you are students, but for people who aren't students in this class, it's a class that focuses on the most extreme penal sanctions that we give in the United States, specifically life without parole sentences, the death penalty, and solitary confinement. We especially highlight the human experience of those who have to undergo those sanctions, which is where Kirk comes in. So Kirk Bloodsworth, as you probably know from the advertisement, is the first wrongfully convicted American to be exonerated from death row due to DNA testing. And it's a personal honor for me to introduce Kirk because he was the person whose story inspired me to go down this road of doing a career in criminal justice reform. He's a very powerful storyteller, so we're very lucky to have him. When I first met Kirk, I was 16 years old, and it was at a rinky-dink coffee shop in Frederick, Maryland, where he was promoting his story because death penalty abolition in the state was on the horizon. And he was trying to get a state senator to swing towards abolition. And since then, it's been about 5-6 years, and Kirk has become quite the nationally acclaimed speaker, speaking from the Colbert Report, which was the most recent appearance that he made, and even internationally, he's spoken at the United Nations and some other really important organizations. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kirk Bloodsworth. He's a wonderful, wonderful person, and I think you guys will all learn a lot from him. Thank you.
I want to tell you all, first of all, thank you for having me here at AU. I've been here several times. I spoke here once with Sister Helen Prazion down at Washington College. And here several times. My lawyer of last resort is a judge in Washington, D.C. His name is Bob Morin. As if you go on to law school around here, you'll probably know him. But thank you so much, folks. And bear with me. I am very froggy. I just got over bronchitis, so I have a real unique sounding voice, I'm sure. I want to tell you all about the first lawyer I ever had. Now I want you guys to picture prison visiting room, okay? Last petition, your lawyer comes off the street through an archway. It's 8 foot high and 10 foot wide. And he sits, you have to talk through the petition, the glass petition, on a telephone. So he sits down with his back to a brick wall. And the first thing out of his mouth, he says, "Kirk, you're in a lot of trouble." I thought that was very true to him, right off the bat. And then he says, "Don't worry. I know my way around the courtroom. I know my way around the criminal justice system. We are going to find our way out of here together." So I started feeling really self-assured. You know, I was seeking death penalty in my case. I needed this guy, and it made me feel a little better. Right before he gets ready to leave, after we talk about the case for about 20 minutes, he reiterated what he said at the beginning. "Kirk, I know my way around the courtroom. We're going to find our way out of here together." Put his hand on the glass to say goodbye, picked up his briefcase, turned around, and ran right to the wall. He was right, I was in a lot of trouble. But on August 9th, 1984, at about 2:45 in the morning, it wasn't funny at all. There's a big bang on my door. Boom, 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 like that. I go to the door and there's flashlights stuck in my face. Step outside, Mr. Bloodsworth. You're under arrest for first-degree murder, you son of a bitch. Just like that. Fist was drawn at me. Turn around, they read me my rights. And that was the last time I seen my small town, my hometown of Cambridge, Maryland, where I grew up as a commercial fisherman and waterman for 8 years, 10 months, and 19 days. About ready to crack. And this all started based on a eyewitness identification of a man last seen with the victim in this case, which was a 9-year-old little girl. Okay, her name is Dawn Hamilton. Now the description is as follows: 6'5", curly blonde hair, bushy mustache, tan skin, and skinny. I certainly wasn't this robust in 1984, but I was 6'1", 230 pounds. I was a big boy, but my hair was the color of a fire plug. I had sideburns down here, and this tooth in front. I do not tan. I told them that I had nothing to do with this case of Dawn's murder. From the very beginning, I used to write all my correspondence to people when this whole thing first started. That was the first thing out of my mouth. I'm an innocent man. I signed my correspondence, respectively submitted Kirk Bloodsworth, A period, I period, M period. An innocent man. Nobody wanted to hear me. The trial took about 2 weeks. Witnesses come to testify, pointing me out in the courtrooms, and that's the guy, that's him, except one of the main witnesses. He never did point me out. They called every witness in the case and said, there was 5 of them in all now, 5. Positive. What's the chances of 5 people being wrong? Probably the same chances as everybody being wrong. 5 positively said it was me. They arrested me on a Thursday. They held a lineup on that coming Monday. They called every witness, told them not much to people. All of them come to say, nobody identifies me into the lineup. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, the 2 main witnesses in the case, the 2 little boys, their parents called the police and said, it looks like my neighbor Kirk. And that's, you know, I stood in position number 6, and that's the 2 little boys made a mistake. Next door neighbor called him and said, I would like to composite. He's saying, I know I'm sitting in this trial for 2 weeks. With my directionally challenged lawyer. I didn't know what to do. And I'm not going to go into all the nuances of the case, because I'm going to sit and talk to you all about this whole thing. I'm sure some of you read this book, or my book. How many people read my book? Shame on every one of them. No less than a D. And we'll sit and talk about it. There's a lot of nuances. I would encourage you to go read Bloodsworth, the true story of the first death row in Exonerated by DNA. It would also help my voice. Trial was over. 2 weeks later, the gavel came down on my life, and the sentence was death in double life. I had never seen the outside again. I was 31 years old. I'm going to flash real forward, sit down, and we're all going to talk. I read a book by Joseph Wrongful called The Bloody. First time a new technology was ever used in a criminal case. Dioxyribonucleic acid. I could not say it then. But it was about this case that this person, these 2 murders over in England in Narborough, nobody had an idea. They DNA tested the male population of this town to find this guy. I tried that in Bethesda or something. See what happened. But they all came forward, and the test results came back, 5,500 men negative for being the Narborough killer. The book goes on and says, but something peculiar happened following that testing. A man was overheard in a local pub bragging to some friends of his and took a DNA test for the real killer. And that killer was Colin Pitchford, the first person ever convicted behind genetic fingerprinting. Gary Dobson is really the first person ever freed from prison beyond DNA testing. I was the first death row capital conviction and freed. Well, that gave me my epiphany. If it can convict a person, why can't it free a person? I started remembering all the information that I had been reading over the years. Possible semen stain on underpants, swabbings, clothes. Dawn Hamilton was brutally raped, sexually assaulted, thrown in a pile of leaves, and just left for dead. And I wanted to find the person responsible for her murder. If I did anything in my life, and I figured if I could do that, I could prove my innocence at the same time. It just didn't happen like that. I took a DNA test in 1992. I was almost 32 years old. 1993 rolls around. My mother died 5 months before I get out of prison. I got to see her body handcuffs and shackles for 5 minutes. I miss her bad. She's the reason I can breathe. I realized it happened so simply to an honorably discharged Marine with no criminal record or criminal history. A wrongful conviction could happen to any one of us. Just a fact of life. But people shouldn't die for it. I was sitting in my cell and a guard put a post-it note in my cell and it said, urgent, call your attorney. I was pretty depressed. I run to the day room with Bob Moore, my lawyer. And if you all knew Bob Moore, and I know you know, very soft. He's not as gregarious as I am. But he was screaming on the other end. Kirk, you're innocent, man. You're innocent. I know that. When are you going to get me out of here? FBI retested it June 28, 1993. I stepped out of prison a free man from 23 to 30. I had no idea that I would be doing this 21 years later. I have a DNA law in my name called the Kirk Bloodsworth Post-Conviction DNA Testing Program. I've testified and talked in front of Congress. I've been from Japan to London and back. I was just a crabber. I never had any ideas. Came to me last year when we ended the death penalty in my home state of Maryland. Woo-hoo! I killed the only thing that almost tried to kill me. Now, we'll never kill anybody in my state again, innocent or guilty. It turned out that 10 years after I got out, that I was sitting again by a telephone. Somebody called me on it. And this time it was the prosecutor saying shrill voice. That's somebody you never forget. Your first wife and the prosecutor who tries to send you to death row. That's a whole nother story. But she was on the other end. She said, I want to talk to you, Mr. Bloodsworth. I have an update on the Hamilton murder. I want to speak to you. And I said the only thing I could say to her at the time, what can I do for you? Y'all thought I was going to say something else. I told her, I said, what do you got? She said, well, can't tell you over the telephone, but I'll meet you anywhere in the state. So I met her at the Burger King in Cambridge. I like box. That cold hit coded database said a real killer is Don Hamilton. And he was not 6'5". He was 5'6" and 160 pounds. And the horrible thing about this daggone thing, he slept in a tier below me for 5 years and never said a word. He was let go 2 weeks before Dawn's murder for 2 attempted rapes of 2 other little girls a year before. They let him go because the witnesses in that case testified against him. Dawn was murdered. I was arrested for Dawn's murder. He was later arrested 3 weeks after that for attempted murder of a woman in Fells Point, where he busted in her door and cut her throat. He took the knife from him, and stabbed him in the foot. That's how they called him. I actually walked into the house, walked right back to where he was living. Police report came about him 9 days, or 8 days before I was arrested. And they never did a thing. He pled guilty to Dawn's murder and got life in prison. After his 45 years is up for the previous one, attempted murder, he did. He'll never get out of prison again. I have to tell you all that I don't know what you're all going to do in life. And I guess it doesn't matter. But whatever it is you do, make sure you do it to the best of your possible ability and turn no corners. You're not helping anybody if you do a test or cheat a test, go around a corner, or if somebody is not doing right in this school, you got to stand up. That's what Mother used to say. You know, because right is light. You have to get up, sit up, hold your head up, and never give up. But do what's right and stand up. But when you all stand up in life, turn around and don't run into that wall. Sit down now.
I'll start this if you don't mind. We're using a book called Life After Death Row, and you are actually featured in the book.
Oh, Lord.
They say very kind things about you. Both of the authors are very
Sandra Westerveld.
Yes, Westerveld and Cook. Now they talk about the ordeal of coping while one is under a death sentence falsely, and then the ordeal of trying to cope after one is exonerated. So can you tell us a little bit about how you survived and managed incarceration facing such a profound false charge?
Well, you know, it's like I never thought of myself as a badass, you know. Still don't, you know. I am try to maintain a certain level of badassness, and it didn't necessarily help me all the time, but it kept people away from me. You're looking at one of the only cats that ever walked out in the prison population in Maryland Penitentiary, what I was charged with, which some people would consider being insane. Why would I want to do that to myself? I just didn't care about that part. I figured they were going to jam me up. It was going to be something else. It was, because I have a tendency to get on people's nerves. And I was a very vocal person in prison. I was very vocal. I was very vocal about the prison itself. I didn't like the way we were being treated. I didn't like the way they would treat anybody. They would treat us like crap. A lot of times. Open the windows in the winter time. Close them in the summer. It was so hot in that place on the 5th tier in the south wing where I was at, because they had to put you on 3-month suicide watch when you got to death. The walls would sweat. It was so hot. They would actually have conversation. Walls. That was a bad place. You could take 3 steps from the back wall, you'd be at the front cell door. You could touch either wall, putting your hands out and going just like, now I have a good wingspan, but I mean, just an inch on either side. They smell bad. It had so much paint on the wall, they had a hole in the wall and somebody had tried to dig a place in it. And before I realized it, I could stick my whole finger almost all the way up to there. That was paint. All this was paint. Now I can tell you, I imagine a good portion of it wouldn't let free. It's slate floor, this place smelled bad. I mean bad. It was hard. It was hard to cope. And when I got out, I thought, you know, just like turning on a light, everything's gonna be all right. I'm 31 years old now, with a 20-some-year-old brain. I was still stuck in 1984. And, you know, I didn't have any idea it was about getting a job, going on a date. I'll tell you, that's really tough. For instance, go out on a date. I've been out a couple months. I go out on a date. I really like this girl too. You know, I'm out on a date. She knows nothing about me. Kirk, everybody says you're a real nice fellow. Where have you been for the last 9 years? You haven't lived here. I've lived up in Baltimore for a spell. What were you doing up there? Well, I was with the correctional system. Well, what happened? I was accused of a brutal murder. I was on death row for 2 years. I didn't do any of it. They asked me to assault. Didn't work over too well. And she left. She fainted. You know, did the bathroom deal, split her also. But just something so small as interacting with another person, trying to explain my life and the general context. It's not like I'm talking, well, I'm at the college, you know, I was a parole. Should have did it that way. You know, it's how do you define yourself? And then how do you really explain, oh, I'm accused of one of the most brutal crimes in the state. No kind of translation can get done that way. So that was hard. Getting a job was hard. Trying to even rolling a quarter around in my fingers or going to the bathroom or just trying to be normal. Like I used to love to watch Little League. Grew up, I helped put the surf shovel at the Little League Park in Cambridge. I was a little baseball player myself growing up. And I was a pretty decent athlete. Everybody in town supported the Little League team, and I was scared because I didn't want people to be to go look at their children. So it's a lot of things. It's more than you would even realize, and that's just touching it.
Fill your water.
Thank you. Can you put some beer in that?
I've got contacts.
I got you.
So there are other questions?
I mean, ask up. Don't. I'm sitting here, so feel free. Please do not be shy.
What happened to you is really, really horrible. I want to explain what happened to me. I'm on the other side of the equation. I was the victim of an embezzlement. And unlike in your case where they were super aggressive and hyper going after an innocent man, I had to work double time to try and get justice for my case. It took 7 years of hiring 3 detectives, 2 lawyers, countless time on my own. Because this actually took place in Michigan, and I was told they never, you know, white-collar criminals get a pass. They always give priority to the guy in the street that sticks a gun in your gut, and he's the one that gets all this time in jail, and white-collar criminals go free. This guy, I finally got this guy, on April 11th, he was sentenced up to 20 years in jail, but it took 7 years of intensive work in my life to get this done. So how can you bring this And then you hear about all this corporate crony criminality at the top levels of government. There's so much influence. How can you bring the system into balance so it's fair to everybody?
Well, the players have to be balanced. I mean, obviously, if the Redskins played with brass knuckles and stuff like that, that would be cheating, wouldn't it? You know, we could hurt them and they could hurt anybody they wanted. But the criminal justice system does something similar to the same thing when the prosecutor in a case withholds evidence. It's like give them a set of brass knuckles. So much. And you have to play by the rules. You can't, and then you can't be complacent about something like your case as well and just not paying attention. It took a long time for you to do it, but the prosecutor should have been checking you out and checking that whole deal out, not trying to put it on your doorstep. That's what I'm all for professional accountability. If a doctor left a set of forceps in your abdomen during a procedure, you would be able to prosecute him civilly for damages and all kinds of things, all the way to the hill. Prosecutor does it. You cannot. Cop does it. You haven't. You can probably try to do it, but they have immunity from prosecution. And the criminal justice system, because of its adversarial nature, has a tendency to not look at the people who are at bar. They look away. They are plagued with being elected, so they have to please their people that voted for them. Judges too. This is a play you play in the criminal justice system. My guess would be is to hold the prosecutor accountable. Like say, this one, it's in Michael Morton's case in Texas. He was a guy who spent 25 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. The prosecutor admitted it, that he ran him up a flagpole and put that man in jail, manipulated the evidence. Now that's the same thing as like they did in my case, and they withhold the evidence about another suspect like Ruffner. I never even knew that until we were writing the book, that they even knew who Ruffner was. They had it right under their nose, but they were so hell-bent on sticking with the original story or the original technical theory of their story. My thing is it just works for them. It can't work for just them. And they have to hold themselves accountable, or we do. And I don't see it happening the other way. I mean, you know how much Michael Morton judge got? They made him a judge, probably. He got 10 days in jail for what he did to Michael Morton. Now, Michael Morton's going to get millions of dollars from that guy, but that's not the point. You know, he should have. Things would get better if they hold the police department, defense lawyers too. I had a doozy. Prosecutor withheld evidence in my case not only once but twice, and then say, "Well, we had all the right to prosecute Mr. Bloodsworth." No, you don't. How can you see something that is wrong that you did, but you were still right to do it? No, sir. You can't have it both ways. And until they come up with that thing, you know, until they really, we feel that, we have to do that as a culture from our legislative standpoint. We can't let them get away with it. Yes?
So, even after your exoneration, did you ever feel like you had to still somewhat prove your innocence to people?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's something that you live with the rest of your life. It's nothing that you can get over with next day. It just don't end the next day. And it's a stigma. That's how come politicians use an accusation. It's just as forceful as the truth. You know, I'm trying to think of that fellow that was, man, he run him through the Atlanta City bombing. He was the guy that accused of doing the bombing in Atlanta during, I think it was Olympics. He wasn't the guy, but the cops didn't care. He just didn't care. Well, we still have probable cause because he was
he was around there. So, you know, most of their parents and their people were around it. Anybody could have had a knapsack. It's the same way what they did with the Spanish train bomb. They blamed that guy, and they got the daggone fingerprints wrong from the aphids test. Wound up persecuting that fellow. He wouldn't even care. Because he's on some obscure list. It wasn't him, it was some other group. Some other person had done that. You have to be accurate, and the thing of it is, when they're not, they can't say, well, okay, it's cool. Well, we didn't know. Well, that's right, you didn't know. We have to work on that, something that people still, to answer your question in a very glib way, funny, they have an organization in this country that believes the earth is flat. They can join them because I'm an innocent man, and it's just, you know, when somebody keeps accusing and don't believe the earth is round, you know, they're ignorant. I just lump them up with them.
Hi, also thank you so much for coming out here. I appreciate it.
You didn't share me your sandwich, I'm upset.
Sorry, it was breakfast. So you kind of just talked about trying to like prove that you're innocent even once you're out. Have you had any difficulties with like record expungement or things like that?
Actually, Maryland's pretty good about that. I would have to say, once I got pardoned, there's a statute in our laws that say you have to be pardoned before you get compensated. I got $300,000 for my trouble.
Probably should have gotten more.
Hey, tell that to the government. Which comes to $3.72 an hour, give or take. John, it's $30,000 a year. I'm not much of a mathematician, but you get my point. But you have to be pardoned first to get that. I hadn't done anything wrong. Why am I getting pardoned? I never did understand pardon. So that puts a stigma. To go right back to your question, even further. Well, why are you pardoned? Is he getting away with something? And so the whole process was just, it drained me because my father didn't have any money. He mortgaged his house to get the second lawyer I had, which wasn't much better, you know. Once my dad gave me the rest of the money, that he changed his whole defense stack. Read my book. You'll get halfway through the trial, he changes his mind about a lot of things. As soon as my father gave me the money. So, it's been tough. It's been tough. Questions? Yes.
I actually have two questions for you.
One at a time.
Alrighty. So speaking of Michael Morton, and there are a lot of other people that have been wrongfully convicted, not too many that have been able to be exonerated, but do you have a community of a small number of people that have been exonerated? And
Oh, yeah.
To talk with one another?
Yeah, we talk all the time. We have the Innocence Network they had a big conference in Portland, Oregon, just recently. Witness to Innocence, whom I belong to at the moment. I'm going to be leaving them soon, but they have a group, death row survivors, that is just, you know, they gather every year and get together. And we have 144 death row survivors in this country who have been exonerated and freed from prison from one means or another. Only 18 of those are DNA exonerations. So that should really get you thinking. DNA is not some sort of panacea, you know, for the rest of the world here. It takes people, investigators like Aubrey, to go out and do the searching and do the stuff. I mean, a lot of things have been. She's really good friends with Sean Ambrose, who was the director of the Innocence Project here in Washington. She was a journalism student. She went out and figured out that Anthony Porter didn't kill this person. Brett, they were getting ready to kill him. It takes some, like, your second question?
So talking about your memoir, the process of writing it, or going through your experience, was that cathartic or negative for you?
Well, I consider this as cathartic as it gets. You know, I've always enjoyed it. I really have, especially, you know, I'm in bad shape. I enjoy public speaking. I think I do all right at it, and I don't have to pay a therapist $200 an hour. So I sit here and talk to the common person, just the average Joe. It's not judging. You're not judging me. You might have a judgment, but you're not going to judge me. You know what I'm supposed to do, or you like me or you don't. Then I don't care either. But I get a lot out of it. Some guys aren't so lucky. They can't even hardly articulate a sentence about what happened to them, which is something that you have learned yourself because of your own situation. You have learned to articulate the feelings that what's happened. It's a hard thing, but man, it's the best thing we get around when all of us get around, for exception of, you know, we have a lot of fun. But, you know, it's just like being in a war. All these guys been through the same war I have, you know, the War of Innocence. And that is a special thing. So that's witnesstoinnocence.org. And you're a nonprofit, you need a lot of money, so come out. And so does the Innocence Network. They have a big thing every year and they pay for people to go. As you're a new exoneree, you can only get that paid for 2 years. So, questions? Come on. Yes.
So I know we talked about a little bit about your experience in prison. I kind of have a combination question.
Good.
Curious to know, I mean, as you're going in, you're knowing you're innocent, you're going in prison. How did you ever doubt your beliefs about your innocence when you're in prison? And then how did that affect the way that you related to other prisoners while you were there?
No, I knew what the truth was. I just couldn't believe that they didn't believe it. That was my big thing. I mean, it was every day. It's nothing I could say. Oh, you're a child molester, a chomo, a short eyes. I would get all these questions. A child murderer, you know. And that happened a few years after I was got. People were writing inside of my truck. Where's your car? But child killer. I did this tool company. I'm not going to mention, Black & Decker. It was written on the side of my truck. I had so much thing. I had the HR department. They kept putting like clippings from the earlier days. I don't know who was doing it. Somebody in there. Never could find it out. But same thing in prison. And but I helped that out because I was always in people's face anyway. They couldn't really deny me. Why are you crying on it? I mean, when we say we're crying on it, you're complaining. You know, you're complaining about the food, you're complaining about your case, you're complaining about life, you're just complaining. And that's what you have to do in order to get anything. So people, I don't think there's no miracle to it. I don't think there's no like elixir. Some people confess to crimes they commit. That don't mean they did it. And it's about 25%, I think, they convicted, confess to crimes they, or if not more. But they were just coerced into doing it. Scared to death, because threatened with the death penalty. We're going to kill you if you don't tell us this. You know, I mean, that has to work on somebody that might not fear of flight. What are you going to do? Questions? Come on. Yes.
Other than the $300,000, were you provided with any other services once you were exonerated?
No. No health care. No any help to go to school. No job placement. Or anything. I was a fisherman, so I already had kind of a background to fall back on from the Eastern Shore. My dad was a fisherman. His father was a fisherman, so Kirk Bloodsworth be a fisherman. And so I had that, but they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to give me nothing else. And some guys, like Clive Charles from Louisiana, he did 20 years in the farm in Angola. I happened to meet Charles, and they wouldn't give him a cent. The sheriff of the county parish he was convicted in Louisiana wouldn't give him a nickel. Do nothing for him. And more than likely Clive Charles' brother committed a rape. And he hadn't signed his life away. He got $25 in a state coat. They don't give you nothing. Question? Yes. You're next. Do you have your hand up? Okay.
Were you able to forgive the prosecutor?
I have forgiven everybody. I have forgiven him. Even what he did to me, he's going to have to ask forgiveness for what he did to Dawn. I can't get past that.
It's actually kind of related to that. So, how do you deal with like the kinds of emotions you feel about like the person who actually committed the crime you were convicted of, and even just like dealing with like you were wrongly convicted, but like do you have any conflicting emotions about those who are guilty and are sentenced to these awful things?
I can tell you I have a lot of conflicting emotions about him, and none of them were pleasant for him. But I can forgive him what he did to me. It's still not like what he did. And it's not like I'm not any giving it, you know, so to speak. I just here and every nigga, you know. I don't have to like him to forgive him. Somebody told me that day, and I thought that was very poignant. It's true. I don't see what it would help me to be in the same room with him or try to communicate with him. No, it wouldn't be good for him. Yes.
How did your attitude towards the criminal justice system and the death penalty change before you were convicted and, you know, after you were exonerated? And I know that you said that you advocated to get rid of the death penalty in Maryland, and you spoke against that. So, just how did that? Were you pro death penalty before? Had you given it a thought?
Well, you know, I came from a family. You did something, you pay for it. That's it. And I guess I'll leave that there. But I never thought about the death penalty. Never had to. I thought about hard crabs and fish and stuff like that, and getting drunk. You know, going out and having a good time and just living it like I was a very blue, with a white collar in my family. We were all blue collar, hard working people. And, you know, it was supper on Sunday and that type of thing, going to church. And then when it first happened, I felt like, well, once they find out, I ain't do this. It's all gonna be okay. I got this lawyer. He's probably find himself around, but we'll get out. I didn't have any money in our lawyer. We didn't have no money, and still cost. My father had his house to get the second lawyer. So, and when it finally happened to me, I was like, I had this sense the whole time. I knew this was going to happen to me. I was going to get arrested. I was going to go to jail and wouldn't be able to, you know, crab anymore. I was just so upset. But how was I going to get past it? And then it hit me. I was sitting in my cell one afternoon. The shuttle had just exploded. This is in 1987, I think. And I was sitting here. My case had just gotten overturned by the Court of Appeals. And I remember writing it down that this is going to happen to me again. And it's so simple for this to happen. By the virtue of, you know how this whole thing started? Next door neighbor called the police and said I looked like a composite sketch. That's how this whole thing started. And then the police jumped on it, and then the prosecutor jumped on that, and then 2 juries jumped on that. But in the final analysis, every single person in that case was dead wrong. And they do not want to admit it. So I had a tough time. But morally speaking, for me, I could kill Kimberly Chain Ruffner myself. If I got a hold of him. You know, if I got a hold of him, I would say, throw him. That's not going to bring Dawn back. And then it's to me, to myself, how easy is it for an innocent person to go to jail for something they didn't do and get executed? We got 2.3 million people in prison in the United States. I'd say about anywhere, they guess somewhere between 5 and 10%. 5 and 10% are innocent. The National Institute of Justice in 1986 came to prison and talked to me. They estimated that 10,000 people a year are convicted of crimes and convicted. We have a prison population of death row of over 3,100. I get chills every day. And I knew then, I just said, oh God, I can't allow it to happen. And then I was very outspoken. And I come from a conservative view, I think. But the truth of the matter is, we have to save the worst. We have to save Kimberly Shea Ruffner in order to protect a person like me. And I don't necessarily want to give him that, but I have to in order to protect the rest. It's a tough call. It's one that I would do gladly in every state in this union. And then definitely once and for all, we should not be killing our own citizens. Yes?
People like to say that in the criminal justice system, you're innocent until proven guilty. To what extent do you believe that's actually true?
I don't. Because society is in the mix. It could really work, I think, but it's the adversarial system that has problems. See, the one thing adversarial is, it shouldn't be adversarial to the truth, though. But if you pit one person against another, and this goes back to seafaring days when captains on ships used to have cases and they were prosecuted. Usually it was the captain that would take the defendant, and it was the first officer that would prosecute. And but we're not on a big open sea anymore. I think we have a lot of ways we can figure this stuff out. The prosecutions, and I think people want to win. That goes to the defense lawyers too. They do some underhanded stuff. But, you know, the prosecution or the charging authority, it's all about the truth. They want the truth. They shouldn't want to try to win a case that they know the truth in. And they won't say it. And their explanation for that, well, we're not here to be the defense lawyer. No, sorry. You are an officer of the court. You're supposed to be doing the right thing. Question? Oh.
I know that you had said that you felt like as an exoneree you hadn't really received any support or assistance. What would you recommend, like, for a program, or if there was, like, if they should receive therapy or psychiatric treatment?
First of all, I think there needs to be federal compensation to all wrongfully convicted people. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. You were in prison for something you didn't do. You got to get paid and take care of it. And not just money. I mean, somebody needs to give you, like you said, counseling and you know, job placement. There's a thing called a Second Chance Act. Prisoners who commit crimes have a right to get housing, job placement, and exonerees don't have anything because there's no constitutional right of innocence after convicted. Anthony Scalia. Factual innocence is no reason to stop a death sentence properly rendered. Bullshit. He's not sitting on death row. He don't know. You can be a textualist all you want, but just it's the essence in the life of life. It's not just something written on a page. And I think it's crazy for the Supreme Court to act like that. We have to change a lot of things, but innocent people, there's The National Registry has it at 1,200 right now. And that's an arbitrary number because we went back from like 89. The death row guys went back from 73 because that's when death sentences started being enacted again. So the number is probably far greater than 144. And they say, well, how come we haven't had any innocent people been executed that's really known? Because they're not alive. It makes sense. And the prosecutors, the governors, all the government officials are making it stop. Cameron Todd William, innocent. I said here, Texas arson case. The arson science was wrong. Reuben Cantu, a case that I'm very familiar with because I worked on a friend of ours, Aubrey, Laura Burstein. Sam Millsap changed the daggone grand jury to convict him just because, and he's a prosecutor. Yes. You know, Troy Davis. If that man wasn't innocent before he got killed, there isn't one. I'm just saying, you have to accept it. There is one, you know. I think that's really stopped it. You can't have all these exonerations and not have killed somebody. It's just not, the world's not dating here. Question? Yes.
Do you think that your conviction was, I guess, the result of a series of unfortunate events like the neighbor calling in and an honest mistake? Or do you think that there's a serious flaw, I guess, in the justice system that was ultimately what put you on death row?
It might have started out as an honest mistake for the neighbor, but what was the bad mistake? The prosecutor manipulating the process because she thought she knew what she was doing.
Do you think that was foul play?
It was. It was foul play when she withheld the evidence about another suspect, when they didn't go after Ruffner, when they did things like, okay, there was a criminal profile done in Dawn Hamilton's case. Now, it was done by a detective in 14 weeks, in a 28-week course in the FBI in criminal profiling. Now, the problem with that is that once they arrested me, they finished the report. And there was more cognitive bias in that than enough. Okay. He said the person would be between the ages of 18 and 25. I was 23. They said this person would have a love for water. They didn't say just like he would like water. He was, because this happened around a pond there, he would have a love for water. A love for it, he said. And they also said that this person would have a domineering mother, girlfriend. Now, come on. How many people think their mom's domineering? It is a wide, broad, you know, come on. And he never finished this until after I was arrested. That's manipulation. And whether we do it on purpose, whether we, do it, subconsciously or something, still makes the system wrong. And they never accepted it. So, he made a lot of mistakes, and it could cost me my life. Question?
Do you think the level of the heinousness of your crime that it involved a child, not only a 9-year-old girl, stigmatized your conviction and incarceration more than it would have if it was like a grown man?
I would say that you're right. There would probably, matter of fact, I think it would have been scrutinized more had it been, a man or something. It would have been another victim besides a 9-year-old child. And that is a problem with the system itself. We look at one crime so badly because, let's face it, I said 9-year-old little girl, that just makes everybody here cringe. Come on. And we want that real person. We want that person responsible. They got myopic. They just went really crazy about it. They would say things like, "Oh, we're looking for this guy," this suspect, he's got blood in his name. I said, my middle name's Noble. Give me a break. I mean, come on. None of it was done with any kind of reasonable logic. They looked at it and they tried to do it twice. Prosecution was big to say, well, you never got the death penalty the second time. Well, did you seek it? They did. They tried to give it to you. So that was for your lack of trying. You know, and then you're circling around the same thing. You never went after the real thing. You should always have to disprove your case and seek it out. They said that's not their job. They said to get the facts. There was no facts. They had witness identifications that were pretty substantial. The two little boys, one of the little boys said when he looked at the picture, he said he looks like the guy a little bit, but his hair is too red. Okay, there you go. And the cop tried to tell him, well, that's just the picture. Oh, come on. You can't do that. They also said when he did the composite, the older of the two little boys did a composite. He said, well, the mustache on this composite don't look right. And he said, well, what kind of mustache you got? Out a mustache in this kit called, it was a Fu Manchu. And cop didn't put it on it. I don't know why. Well, why don't you listen to your suspect, you two witnesses? Kimberly Ray Shea Ruffin out of Fu Manchu. Some of the easiest things are most simple, give you most damage.
So are you assuming he had a picture in his head that was already you because you were a suspect? And that therefore
well, no. He didn't want to add the picture because of the little boy. That's the thing. I mean, the little boys only saw this guy on an elevated position looking down at the bunch next to the pond. The sun behind his head. They had just called this turtle his head. They weren't looking at him too long. You know, obviously 6'5" to 5'6". You know, elevated position, sun behind your head. They just, you know, they weren't even going to help her find her friend. She's playing hide and go seek. That's what she had asked. This guy spoke up. That was Ruffin, standing on the rise of the hill. They weren't thinking. And these are homicide detectives that had 20 and 25 years experience in homicide for Baltimore County. You had another problem though. The chief prosecutor of the county liked to prosecute the death penalty a lot. 21 people that sat on Maryland's death row, 19 of them were from Baltimore County. There you go. It's the jurisdictional disparity within the death penalty itself. Some people would just do it. I mean, you could go to Harford County and then go to Howard County for heroin, the same case, same amount, and get 10 years for one and no time for the other. We have to really pay attention to some questions. Come on, shoot them out. I see you over there. I got you.
Have you communicated or been communicated with by the victim's family, by Don's family?
I was talked to early on by Sissy. She was the lady that was watching Dawn the day she was murdered. And I talked to the father through the media. That was his only child, for God's sake. And he's not faring too well. Her mother died too. And they all feel really bad what happened to me. Apologized to me actually through the media. He didn't have nothing to apologize to me for because if it was my child, I think I would probably feel the same way. Cops telling him, you know, oh, that's Bloodsworth, he's the guy. You know, there's no sense in making him feel any worse than he does. But we all, actually I did a paper for one of Dawn's friends and she was DNA. She was playing hide and go seek. She had asked me to do a paper. You know, you were talking about, somebody was saying, and I don't know who, about feeling why did Dawn die and why did Dawn get murdered and I didn't get executed? You know, why did she suffer so many? And I'm telling you, when you read the book, she suffered greatly. I hope she didn't feel any pain. She was unconscious when some of that was done to her because it was the worst thing you ever want to wish on. Anyone wouldn't want to wish on. I just, and if any guilt's in my mind,
What was like the difference between serving the 2 years on death row and then your other time, or was it?
It was the same because the death row walked in population in the Maryland Penitentiary. We walked around together. I mean, her father, her grandfather was agreed by priest in prison, and they let him in myself. You know, we were pretty lax. Nobody executed anybody in Maryland since 1961. They hadn't executed since John Thanos was the next execution coming out of Maryland in '94, I think, or '93. It was like they pardoned me and they killed him. So that was like, what's that, 30 some years, you know. So it was much difference. Now it's different. Everybody's all death row. There's only 5 guys remain on death row in Maryland. They never commuted their sentences yet. Ed Sandy, Granson, Vernon Evans, and I don't know the other 3 fellows, but John Booth was the other one. And so I don't know. I didn't want to be there 1 second, and every time I walked in the yard, I should have never been in any section in that place. But I was a decade there, and I wouldn't wish that on nobody. See some hands. We're really good. So, did somebody back here too? Okay, you've been waiting a long time. I'm sorry.
You talked about how you were kind of a force in getting Maryland to deal with that penalty. How do you think that kind of legislation could become bigger scale and more widely known throughout the country?
I have done grassroots in the last 6 years, and all 6 states have felt. I work with murder victims' family members too. People like Rennie Cushion and Vicki Sheever, who are also friends of mine, but they suffered murder and they have a unique way to express why they don't want the death penalty because they don't want it in their name. And, horrible stories just like the one I just told you. But it's about the stories of the exonerees, I think, that have resonated throughout the United States. Since I got out 21 years ago, we have canvassed the earth pretty much. I mean, everybody knows about wrongful convictions today. In 1993, the Innocence Project in New York existed. There's satellite innocent projects from one end of this country to the other. And we have also gotten over 300 people out since then. It's just made a big difference. Innocence has made a big difference. And to abolish the death penalty. So I just got back from New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago. That's why I wasn't here a week ago. But I had to testify in New Hampshire State Legislature trying to abolish the death penalty too. Innocence is the deal. Anybody back here? Questions? Oh, yeah.
When you were exonerated, how did you decide to sort of dedicate really the rest of your life to this cause, as opposed to going back to the shore and sort of trying to lay low or trying to start things back up where you left them all?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's a good question. We were talking about that this morning. I just couldn't sit around anymore and not do something. I felt like, and I fought against it too. It's not like this was no easy chore for me. And then people kept asking me to keep coming. You know, have you ever seen that one that was, what's the Godfather movie trilogy, the third one when Michael Corleone goes, "Any more back here?" It was just the same thing. Every time I go trying to go through to grab it, somebody called, "Come speak here. Can you speak here? Can you go talk to this senator?" And I finally just threw my hands up and said, "Okay, I get it." And I've never stopped. And it's the best thing I ever did, because I would have met nice people like Aubrey here, and I have maybe not have wanted to do what I wanted, but I've certainly benefited from the outcome of what I've done. And, I've been friends with the most powerful man in the United States, at Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont. He and I are tight as you can get two people that is not a senator. He just mentioned my case from the floor of the Senate today. I don't know, but I think this was my calling. Maybe all this happened for a reason, I don't know. But I haven't stopped, and I don't intend to stop. But, you know, I need some time too. I just can't afford it. I'm 54 years old, and I'd like to go to Jamaica for a few weeks, relax, or have a red streak, chill out. But it's just too much to do, and I'm not going to give up.
You were saying earlier that innocence has made all the difference. Do you think that even prosecutors now are aware of this issue more than they would have been 25 years ago, and has it affected them?
Well, I think they've been aware of it for longer than that. I think, you know, when you try to hustle somebody, you know the hustle's coming. And that's, I have to say, I think they were more worried about winning than they were about looking bad, right? I think our society, see, when I was growing up, you and I, we were growing up, it was, you're 10, right? Yes. So in the 50s, there was a show on TV called Perry Mason. He was a defense lawyer. He was ready, he was good to go. Cops on TV, well, he won everything. Inmate, he won a lot. Now, it's the whole genre. It's CSI, go get them. We got this test we can do in 60 seconds. We can find a guy. Grassy knoll. It's all changed. Society has changed. You know, it's just changed. We had a difference of opinion about people back in those days. When you went to court, you told the truth, you didn't go to jail. What a joke. That was such a joke. It wasn't true. Our criminal justice system adversarially is just made up to put somebody away. It is built for that reason. It is just like, you know, put you on a record, man. If the cops think you did it, they're going to do everything to prosecute. You know, and how many people here think O.J. Simpson did it? Why? Why do you think he did it? He rolled the dice. He went, he had some of the best lawyers in the country. Who did Kirk have? And I lost. You cannot, shouldn't, the criminal justice system shouldn't be divided like that. You know, this Petraeus guy that's on trial now, was the last, in South Africa, yeah, he was the runner, handicap runner, but we have been so enthralled. Media plays a big role in that stuff. Media played a big role with O.J. Simpson. Again, big. And So we have to, it has to change. The media has to get the hell out of it. You shouldn't even know who a defendant is until he goes on trial. The prosecution and everybody, they should have hearings beforehand to see whether or not there's any validity of going forward. And I'm not talking about circumstantial evidence of 5 people. You know, it just doesn't make any sense.
You sort of mentioned CSI and media. Do you think that shows like CSI and Special Victims Unit glamorize the role of like prosecutors and cops and don't do enough to represent the perspective of like convicts or people who are accused?
You saying it yourself. It's just the truth. I think it's there is only one really good forensic science, I think, and that is DNA. That's only as good as the technicians that do it. And it doesn't happen in 60 minutes. No way. They have rape kit testing that is backlogged for 8 years in this country. Debbie Smith is a rape victim here over in Virginia. It took 6 years to get her rape kit. 350,000 at least that haven't been tested. We got the technology, but we don't have the money. I mean, there's the resources, you know. It's easy to go to a CSI lab on television and say, well, you check this rape kit out, put this in, you know. It doesn't work. And I think it's fooling the people to believe it is. They should do a show on that. It doesn't work. Questions? Yes, sir.
During your time in prison, what did you do to cope with everything that was happening? Like, what tactics did you do?
What's that now? Say it again.
During your time in prison, what did you do to cope with the entire situation, all the stress?
I read a lot. I mean, I really did. I read everything from Gestalt psychology to Stephen King. Don't ask me what that first book's about. I have no idea. And I read it twice. But I just escaped. I did a lot of yoga, not meditation, not yoga. I'm not the yoga guy. But I meditated a lot. And I did drugs, man. I did drugs. I did everything from everything I can get my hands on. I made really good wine, too. I occupied myself. I mean, there was times when I would count the pot marks in a cinder block. I had it graphed all out, did this whole thing. Pretty neat. There were some guys that did playing cards. They painted playing cards on themselves. Anything to get you out of it. Reading was my thing. And, you know, I played cards, I played chess, I just tried to stay busy, and I read. I would read. I had 3 or 4 books going every day. And then on top of my case, I was reading all the case material. Reading everything about discovery, about DNA and all this stuff. I was constantly, blah, 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 every day. And praying a lot. I mean, incessantly.
A lot of people live in fear in prison, but you never mentioned fear. Was that something you were in control?
No, I was scared to death. I was scared to death every day. I just faked it. I mean, you know, I walked out and I was a pretty big boy, so they didn't know I wasn't crazy. So I figured, you know, and I never backed down too. That's another thing. Once you grab the dog by the tail, you better grab it. And then I would never back down. That was the other thing. Once I went past that point. Yes, sir.
As an innocent man, did you resent these guys around you that claimed they were innocent, that you knew probably weren't innocent? Did that not minimize your own claim to?
That's something you don't do in prison. You don't minimize anybody. Not unless you want to stay alive. Maybe you want to stay alive. I never judged other people. And I think that's why I got along with a lot of guys, too. I mean, I just never judged them. And some of these cats really did some really bad things. I mean, and they gloated about it too. But I would just like hold them off. Look, I don't want to hear about your stuff. I never listened to other people's problems like that. If it was like you wanted me to write a letter, you wanted me to read a letter, something like that, sure. But I didn't get into your stuff. You don't do that in jail. Not survive very long. It's not conducive to that kind of behavior. Yes.
What were race relations like in prison?
Wasn't too cool. But it was worse between somebody from Baltimore and DC than it was from a black or a white guy. That's what used to get me. I couldn't get over that. But I mean, it was awful. But I got along with as many people as I could get along with, but I treated everybody like an acquaintance too. So I would only let you in so far. Even my best person that I was around. And her grandfather was more of a friend to me than anybody in prison. But racially speaking, it was bad. I was in a prison, it was like 85% black. So. I was in there for 2 riots. I went for the big race riot, but I was in 2 other riots. The guards got beat up real bad. And C dormitory got took over. That was real bad. That was real bad. That's when you raped me. Heard all the boys up there. They raped the boy so bad. Pulled a train on him until he begged to give oral sex. Stop raping him. I can hear him screaming through the bars at C dormitory. Couldn't walk for 3 months. They were using broom handles on him and everything else. Prison's a bad place. Yes?
You've talked about your religious beliefs in passing a couple times. Did your innocence of being convicted kind of cause you to waver in your beliefs at all? After seeing like what you saw being in there and like your experience as an innocent man?
Well, I seen a man set a Bible on fire, and I never, I asked the guard to move me from by his cell, because I believed it was faith that I became a Catholic in prison. I turned to Catholicism based on the reverence of the church, and I read the Bible all the time. I've read it from cover to cover several times, pretty much New Testament. I read the Bible maybe a couple times. I believe something. I don't know if it's a scat with a beard, with a big robe or anything, but I just think there's something greater than ourselves. What I would like to call God. So, and it's something I can lean on, And I tell you, it really helped me out. It did have that faith in something bigger than me. Okay, this is just a little stop and point, Kirk. Relax. It'll be okay. And people were screaming and setting fire and it was like that. It was this continuous thing. And I had doubts, man. I had doubts. My faith got shook many times. But I was really frustrated. And it was, I was sitting in my house and I watched the Green Mile. I shouldn't have done that. And then I looked up toward heaven and I said, Dawn Hamilton's blood is crying from the ground. And I prayed it out. I'll never will forget it because I wanted to catch this guy. I really did, man. I wanted to find out who did it. And I'm paraphrasing the part in the Bible where he's talking about Abel's blood is crying from God, speaking to Cain. Abel's blood is crying from the ground. So I used the same prayer, so to speak. It was an admonishment to Cain. 3 weeks later, they called nothing. I mean, okay, maybe they were just circling around and doing a DNA test finally, and they called it, but it was spiritual. And finally, I had peace. You know, I really did. That and the day they ended the death penalty in Maryland. So I feel like, you know, I've come full circle. He called him, and they ended the death penalty. I'm so cool when he wears shades now. I love it. Questions? Oh, sorry.
You said you did a lot of reading, other than were there any books that really stood out for you that you can still remember reading?
Yeah, I was telling the professor coming up here, Beautiful Swimmers by William Warner. It's about crabbing. And William Warner did an excellent job of describing it, you know, and I read it like 2 or 3 times. I said, it's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful book. If you want to read anything about the waterman's life, yeah, you'll absolutely enjoy it. And it talks about those green and emerald shapes and line. And if you all do crafts, you know what I'm talking about. So, very good. That was really good. Stephen King too, believe it or not. Let's see, the Stand. That Cemetery was the scariest daggone book I ever read. I read it in prison. And but The Stand, and I read all his Parker's books, The Running Man. I read a lot of Louis L'Amour, and I like some of those, you know. Gray, Hemingway, Google Feast, loved a lot of stuff. I loved Hemingway anyway. He was like, he would always describe something. And it'd make you picture yourself somewhere else, you know, when he was fishing. Oh man, at sea.
Kirk, as an innocent man in prison, if you had a chance to talk to a group of wardens, what would you tell them about conditions and what maybe they should be as opposed to what they are?
Well, see, wardens have a problem. From humanity to corrections, they feel like they have to correct someone. Society in general in the United States feels that we send a person to prison. That is not quite enough punishment for them. But that is why we have courts, and that's why we have sentences, and people go to jail for punishment, not as punishment. You know, you can't, you know, I mean, you don't go there for punishment. That is your punishment. You go to prison, sit in a cell, you know, be a part of the program. But most people seem to think society, wardens too, feel like they need to punish them further. You haven't learned your lesson yet. I had them always telling me that. You know, warden got mad at me because I asked for a Frisbee. I love to play Frisbee. I always have. I can't put down for that, but I love playing. I love throwing Frisbee. And we used to take the tops off chicken liver buckets. I know it's gross, but we'd wash them all. And then, you know, and then throw that across. I said, man, why can't I get a real Frisbee? We'll get rid of 190 grams, you know, be able to sling that. Oh, you're going to use it as a weapon. And then I looked out in the softball field. I said, according to the Easton baseball bats, huh? You know, and this was my contention, but they should have used a Frisbee. It kept a lot of people, it would have kept a lot of people get that Frisbee going. Everybody would have had something to do. Instead of baseball bats where 6 guards get beat. And a weight room. They feel like if they give you a basketball, a weight room, and, you know, play some softball, flag football in prison. But, you know, they should have had more track stuff. They should have had more things that were interactive. And then working on projects that would help the community versus that way. And it can be so hard. I think there was a movie that came out, Robert Redford played it many years ago, called Brew Baker. And it was based on a true account. The guy in the Georgia Correctional Services that came in as a progressive warden. they have to be easier on people. And, you know, certainly keep the place safe. Make sure that there's, you know, the guards not getting shanked to death, right? I mean, you have your personnel to do that with, but you also have to have the employees around you that are doing the right thing. I mean, you can't have a guard that's, you know, a little sadistic treating you like, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. You know, I had a guard, he'd come on my side, he'd spit in my coffee every day. Just spit it. Just spit right in it, just like walk away. And I would throw it on him. And then it would start this big thing. You know, and then, you know, he wound up getting kicked out because somebody that was really, you know, that was working in the services from some other end. They caught him doing something like that. There should be psychological testing for all the guards. How many people see the Stanford study? Has anybody ever heard of the Stanford study? We'll figure that out. That was a setup. We can do it. Have a grade, come on. We need, wards need to really psychologically test. And, you know, the prison population on death row in California is 700 and something. 700 some people on death row in California. They just keep them up on a cell for years and years and years and years and years, and don't give them money, at least a little bit of services. They had, you know, the ward should be, make some adjustments on that and start really letting them outside. Letting them outside. I mean, there's other ways we can do this thing. I'm sure you're going to have some inmates that are just going to be hell to deal with. Psychotic. 30 or 40% of all inmates in this prison system in the United States are mentally ill. We have to do something about that. Several years ago, we stopped sending them to state hospitals and started sending them to prison before we think about treatment. We got to change it. So, questions? Am I answering your question? Okay.
So again, combination question, but what was the most difficult thing you faced after leaving prison? And then if you could just talk about maybe like your economic status and how you coped after prison as well.
Right.
What you did.
I've been homeless 3 times. I'm not much of a financial planner. I feel like, you know, got money in my pocket, I got money, right? It doesn't work that way when you spend it. I never knew how to balance a checkbook. Taxes, forget that. You know, it's like, by the way, I think that's the other compensation you ought to give. Wrongful convicted, you shouldn't have to pay taxes for the rest of your life. That'd be awesome. But, you know, trying to prepare a meal, okay? I mean, some of these things were so simple. I was lucky because while I was sitting in prison studying, reading, or looking over my case, the only channel I could get on my little black and white TV was Maryland Public Television. Well, from 8 to 4 every day, it was cooking show. So I learned how to cook. I don't know how, by osmosis, I guess. I would sit there, you know, watch all of it, listen to, because I couldn't, sometimes you could see it, depending how far I had my soap line. But, you know, Julia Child, I just, baby chicken. And I would come home and I would just, you know, I thought of that stuff. Man, I needed some help. I really did. And I needed somebody to sit me down and say, Kirk, look, you know, this is how we live. And show me that, okay, you got to pay your telephone bill because they'll cut it off. And if you don't pay your rent, they'll evict you. And everybody's not your friend. You know, because I got all my money. I got $300,000, 190 of it went right out the door to the banks that I had borrowed. You know, my father and I had borrowed money. And so, and I gave my dad, well, that was all, I had $110,000. Jamaica got that. And I just, you know, I thought I had money. I didn't have anything. And that was my biggest, I didn't know what to do. I was still a young, crazy kid. My mom, she would take money. I would come home when I was working, and she said, here, if we're going to sit down, never got the chance to have a conversation. And I got married too young, too fast. And by the time it was all gone, just all gone. I was living in my truck. A year after I got my check, in the wintertime with no windows, no heater, $5 in my pocket. And I shouldn't have had to suffer that. But there's guys now that are hopeless. You know, one guy in Chicago, I'm not going to mention his name, but he gets $100,000 a year. He spends it all and then lives on the street until his check comes back. That's no way. You know, you have to do something. So I just wish that there was something, but nobody wants to talk to these guys. It needs a lot of conversation needs to be had in a larger sense. Did I answer your question? I feel like I'm rambling. Anybody? Oh, yes, thank you. Oh.
Yeah, so in the time that you were in prison, like what were some of the biggest changes in terms of like the time when you went into prison, the time you came out, like technology-wise?
Yeah, toilets that flush themselves. That was a big thing. You know, cell phone. I came out, pagers were kind of big, 93, and then and everybody dressed different too. It was like a big thing. I was still stuck in the 70s or 80s. I'd really kind of jumped in the 70s, had a little bit of 80. And I didn't know how people interacted with me because they acted weird to me. It was like, we go to a bar or something, you know, everybody go out, we sit at a bar. It was just like, everybody, you know, women actually asked men to dance. I was like, really? No, that's new. That's a new thing. And I didn't know how to do that. I was like, I gotta wait. So it was just all super different. You know, one of the biggest things, I had baked a chicken, made mashed potatoes, gravy, you know, because it's something I thought about. And so I'm sitting here looking at this bird. It's beautiful, right? I can't carve it because I didn't know how. And so I acted like a beast to the chicken. And it wasn't pretty, but, and everybody was looking at me really crazy. I was just starting to pull back. You know, I thought I was at this big long table in Northland or something, eating big hunks of meat. But somebody should have, no. And it all changed. People died. My uncle died. My mother died. My best friend committed suicide. I had to come home to nothing, nobody. My dad, he was, my wife, his wife was gone, my mother was gone. I didn't have anybody to cling to. My sister and I were estranged because we hadn't seen each other in 10 years. My niece was 9 years old when I went away. She was a teenager going to college, you know, she was just, it was really funny. And I'm just sitting around waiting for something to happen. It changed so much. Bridges had literally been built and destroyed when I came across the Choptank River. No.
Do you think the people that were really close to you, like you said, you mentioned your sister and other family members, do you think they ever doubted your innocence? Or did everyone trust you and know that you were innocent?
My sister just thought I was weird, but she never doubted me. You know, my parents never, my mother. not even a bit. My dad was a little different. He would ask me all the time. He would come in, you have anything to do with it? No, Dad. I do it. And then next week, you sure you had nothing to do with it? No. I knew it. It's like, because he was taught for a period of time, for so many years, that cops don't do that. Cops don't do that. They don't make mistakes. So that was a little different. So I had to do that. Most of my friends, now I had a couple that aren't my friend anymore because, they said a lot of stuff. They actually believe the cops and everything they said. And they actually left town and moved away. Not because they thought I was going to do anything, because they were just stupid. They were ashamed of it. So the difference was, okay, I'm walking around the street in 1993. DNA is new to everybody. They think that's a sort of a shaman science. So, get out of jail free card. And I'm walking down the street, so people are just trying to cross the street away from me. Okay? So 10 years later, they catch Ruffin. They're all coming up to me now. Hey, Kirk, what are you doing? What's your name? And I was like, who are you? I was your barber when you were a kid. Well, you didn't talk to me 10 years ago. Why are you talking to me today? So it's resentful. You feel like, well, I seen you cross the street. I didn't know how to act. Oh, you should have asked me. And so I could probably run for mayor again. I won't, but. So everything changed. Everybody treated me different. And it was, and then when they called, everything's cool again. So that's the thing. I think people fear what they don't know, and they were afraid. I think a lot of people just didn't know how to, honestly. Questions? Yeah. Nope. You go. I'll statue. Good.
Okay. So when you got out, how did you deal with the feeling like you had lost, 9 or 8 years of your life? How do you make that up? And you said you still felt like you were, 20-something years old. And how did you deal with that feeling, or how is that going to change now, 20-something years later? Do you still feel like you lost that time, or like everything happens for a reason? Or?
It's gone. Time is gone. You'll never get it back. It's bad for me. I mean, that was the years that I was going to make my life. I was really going to make my move in life. And that's always been absent in my life. I mean, most of you are like in your 20s, right? That's the best years of your life. It's when you're going to really kick it up, kick it out, or whatever you're going to do. I mean, it's what molds you in today. I got molded in prison. And most of my idealism comes from sitting in that cell. Most of my feelings about the criminal justice system is because of that cell. I would watch on TV, the ball would drop sometimes in Ann Arbor, or get a letter from Cambridge that so-and-so is getting married, and that was a girl I dated in high school. It's all gone. Everything's gone. My best friend was suffering so much from depression, he took his own life, and he never wrote me because he didn't know how to talk. If I was around, I could have said something to him. We were that close. But he felt so embarrassed by himself, so everything changed. Everything, it was those years. I'm still upset about that, I'll never get them back.
Our class, all of us have read about people on death row and how they experience depression and anxiety while they're in prison. Did you ever experience that to the point where you wanted to drop your appeal? I know you never questioned your own innocence, but they just didn't feel like actually fighting for it anymore.
Did I want to give up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. there was times, just say, you know, screw this, man. I thought about escape a couple times. Then I thought, like, where the hell am I going to go? You know, it's like, where am I going to go? So I was like, I was so mad. I was depressed for, I know it was a good 8 months after the second conviction. I mean, I didn't come out. I tried to sleep it all. Everybody goes through that. You try to sleep away your time. Have you ever tried to sleep to something you really importantly want to do? Like, have you ever done that, any of you? Ever want to sleep something? Well, I'm just going to sleep until it comes because I would be really happy. Like Christmas was when you were a kid. You can't do that in prison. And, you know, I see people just go mad. And I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to survive this damn thing. I was innocent, so why shouldn't I? And finally I just said, "Dad, quit it." You know, I'm going to get within the program of my own thinking and get the hell out of here. I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I saw this skeleton looking me back in the face. I was doing drugs and screwing off. I was really messed up. I said, "You got to stop." And the one voice that came out of somewhere that I'd never heard before, and it was the voice of her name, was Dawn Hamilton. How was I going to sit here and let the damn state do this to me and not find a real killer? Buckle down. I can tell you by that point, I was writing so many letters a day. I mean, I was reading like incessantly. I had changed my life from a person that didn't give a shit to a person that was going to find out where the shit was. And I did just that. I had to, you know, I had it, I'm trying to think, it's something that Andy Dufresne said in Shawshank Redemption. You got to get busy living or get busy dying. And, you know, I know that's a line from a film, but it's pretty accurate. I got busy living.
The man who committed this crime was in the prison. Was he in the prison while you were there?
Yes, he was there for 5 years in a tier below me. I actually gave him library books and we lifted weights together, and I spotted him a couple times. I think about that and relish that thought, hindsight, as I was spotting him. And it's not a good outcome. Whoops, sorry. But, you know, that's, what would have gained had I called him, had I figured it out. He was right there. He was right under all of our noses. The police too. The police and the prosecutor, they knew him. The difference between, if they'd have called that police report, called that people, the woman who wrote a police report, her name was, I'm trying. She was a Hispanic lady, and her husband had seen this. It was really like after this murder of Dawn happened, he was kind of freaking out. He said, "You know, I remember seeing him talk about Ruffman on the 25th of July. He had put a check on the counter the day, and he said he was wiping his face off, running down the street with his shirt, you know, wiping himself off completely and looking around and was like white as a ghost. Like he was scared. You know, he like deliberately ran upstairs and he didn't see his guy for a few days. And he said it really hit him. Funny. He had the same clothes the guy was last seen with and all this. It was right there. Baltimore County, where this murder happened at, and basically he lived across the county line. The two jurisdictions never really spoke about it. And so all they had to do was the homicide detectives from here, called the homicide detectives, the cops, and they knew about Ruffin. He was a bad boy. He was accused a year before that of 2 little girls he dressed up as a security guard for a railroad company and put the suit on and all. He accosted these 2 girls and brought them into bushes. That's how he got busted the first time. And it took about a year. The 2 girls didn't testify against him. He had a rap sheet, was I am tall. He was suspected of pushing his stepfather down a flight of stairs. He had been in and out of Perkins in these mental institutions since he was a kid. Had a lot of aggressive tendencies towards women. And, well, that was the profile. You know, some of it was pretty accurate, but he just, nobody went to check. Nobody went to check.
It's hard to imagine the conversations you would have with this guy. I mean, he is the perpetrator of this crime. He's lifting weights with you. He knows you're innocent, and he's able somehow to sustain a relationship with you.
And one of his biggest things, and you know, hindsight's 20/20, but he never looked me in the eye. And he did something pretty damning to him, and I never even realized it until later. There was at the crime scene at Dawn's, there was a big red gum wrapper. You all know what big red gum is, cinnamon. And, well, I hate cinnamon. That was always an issue, and I said, you know, I didn't like cinnamon. They never even checked it out. We had a fingerprint on it or nothing. So the day I'm leaving, I'm passing out all my cigarettes. Since I've already got the DNA test, I'm out. I'm gone. He calls me down to his cell and said, hey, you talking to people. You know, you don't want a bad breath, piece of gum. And he wanted to hand me a big red stick of gum. And I never even thought about it until 10 years later when the prosecutor's telling me he's the guy. And I just wanted to kill him. And he was right there. He would never look at me though. He would never look at me. He was just like, he would offhand conversations and he would just, you know, when you get talking to him, he would just kind of roll his way, look somewhere else when he was talking to me.
Where is he now?
He's in up in Hagerstown. They got him on watch. He can't walk around because I happen to know a lot of people in prison, and they were afraid the prisoners were going to retaliate against him, and they did actually. They tried to get to him, but he's in some special place. I don't know where. They won't tell anybody. They certainly won't tell me. But I get calls from parole people all the time. He'll never get it. He's got to do his 45 years for what he did to the woman, Phelps woman, before he starts his life sentence. And that'll be when he's 75. He's a couple years older than me. But that'll take care of it. Questions?
Probably covered everyone's questions. I want to just take a minute to thank you so much for visiting us. We've read about your story and your experience in our book. We're trying to look at extreme punishment both as they affect innocent people and people who are guilty of the crimes of which they're convicted, and trying to understand sort of the human experience of undergoing these sanctions. And your comments and remarks are very valuable to us. In this class, a lot of students have been moved to write poetry in response to accounts of the experience of extreme sanctions. And we as a class, represented primarily by Alex Patel, have written a poem in your honor, which we have printed and signed, and we'd like you to hear sort of the final part of our class today.
Sure enough.
Very good. So Alex, are you ready to read?
It's awesome. What's yours?
I delegate all the time.
Our class class was very inspired by your story, so I decided to write a poem. Hopefully you like it. Let us know. Alright, so it's called A Forgery for Kirk Bloodsworth. The rain shines through the halls. The shadows creep around the corner. I can still hear the echoes of the past. They painted me as a different man. A forgery is mistaken for the original. People become brick walls, empty to my prayers. The cell recedes into silence. If it walks like a prisoner, talks like a prisoner, then it is a prisoner. It's easier to throw away the key than to forgive an enemy. I was a convenient untruth, free by science in its youth. Is justice worth a price when hollowed shells are bound to infinity? A subjective state of mind, valued over an objective scientific find. The worst nightmare comes after me. My release is just one of plenty, yet they still incarcerate the many. Forge the evidence when they don't have it. The American conscience is waking up. As good men and women speak out, we are finally getting a close-up. The system is now treated with doubt. I'm Kirk Bloodsworth. This is my rebirth.
We have actually a signed version. This will be on eBay. It'll be invaluable. So this is the poem, and this is all the students in the class on D. And thank you so much for the inspiration.
Oh man, that's awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. Nobody's ever wrote a poem, but that was beautiful, man. It's
I guess that's our class for today. Thank you so much for making it possible.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We meet again next week.
I have a movie, a documentary film that's supposed to be out this year.
All right.
So it's called Bloodsworth, an Innocent Man. So as soon as he comes out, I'll tell you. And one more thing. Call Congress and tell them to pass the Justice for All Act. Has the Kirk Bloodsworth conviction DNA testing program in it. And just do that for me and I'll get you a free ticket or something. Thank you.